What's up, Ham Fam? Welcome back to another episode of Heart as a Mother. For those of you who are just tuning in, we are Hara and Jizzy, just two moms on a mission to create a safe space for other moms, dads, or anyone really to share in the honesty and the realness that comes with parenting while being able to laugh at yourself. And as usual, I am joined by my lovely co host, Harleen.
Hey everybody, so welcome back. I just want to take a moment to reflect on all the amazing people that we've had the pleasure of talking to and learning and what's going on with this. I know, guys, I've been doing this for a year and a half and I still can't get this whole mic thing. Like, what is wrong with me? So I still can't believe we're doing this and I feel like I need someone to pinch me. Like, don't literally pinch me because somebody pinched
Oh,
me
yeah.
on the self-defense class and it hurt. It hurt. So thank you to all the listeners, supporters, families, and believers. You guys truly make this journey unbelievable. We also want to what? We want to also let our ham fam know that we're going to take a break in August. As you guys all know, we've been super busy, and obviously, when we say things are balanced, it's never balanced. So it was very, very heavy on him, not so much on family. And we owe it to our family, especially our kids and Giselle's spouse, to just take that break and have some family time. It's really important to make sure that we're all connecting still. So I hope for all the moms and the parents out there, they're doing the same because it's important. Yeah, but we are not going anywhere. You guys can still slide into our DMs and check out our stories.
Yes, we're still brewing stuff up behind the scenes.
Always.
We're not really taking a break. We're taking a break from recording, but we're still working hard. And be sure to check out our website, heartasamother.com, for exciting events and keep up to date with what's happening. We just finished our very first self-defense class, which was led by Simo Josie Fierro Roxas. It did so well, and since it did, we're bringing it back before school starts, so stay tuned for that. Also, we have something brewing for our ham fam in the works. And if you need a break and want to get together while your kids are being tended to, then this is for you. So, I mean, this is also for the non parents as well. This is for you guys too. We know COVID has hit everyone hard, and now that it's going away, we just want to show you all a little love. So, stay tuned for the details on that.
Yeah, and you guys finally get to hang out with us. So for everyone who's asking the question, is Giselle and Harleen actually like this in person? 1000%. Probably way too over the top. So be ready if you're going to come hang out with us. So if you haven't done so, please follow us on Instagram, Facebook, subscribe to our YouTube. And again, for anybody who wants to support us, you can buy us a coffee at www.buymeacoffee.com/HA Mother. So, okay, lots of information that was there. So are you guys ready to meet our guest? Because
Yes.
she got into this profession because she wanted to help people. She was born in Ontario, raised in Alberta, where she was forced to speak French growing up, which today she's thankful to her parents that forced her. She loves being close to the mountains, the nature, and those amazing sunrises and sunsets that Calgary has to offer. She is a registered psychologist working with teens and their parents. We want to welcome Chantal Cote.
You got it.
Yes, yes, I didn't butcher it. Yes.
Hi, Chantal.
Oh,
Welcome.
hi, thank you so much.
So, tell us a little bit more about why you decided to specialize in teen psychology in particular.
Okay, yeah, for sure. I am like driven by this purpose. It just dropped in, which sounds like maybe a little silly, but it dropped into me that I was like, I want to help 100,000 teens build bulletproof mindsets, which to me means like be able to ride the ups and downs of life because life is going to keep throwing stuff at us and it's not always easy. And so if we can get to a place where we can take whatever it's throwing at us, we're positioned in a much better place. And I think that probably comes from, my experience struggling. We were just talking before the podcast how I was so shy when I was a kid. I was leaving high school and like having a conversation with a new person. I'd be dead doing this, my 16-year-old self. I would shake, I would turn red, I would like just want to disappear. And I was really almost like a dysfunctional young person. I was
So,
really,
social anxiety is what it was.
that's what it was, but
Yeah.
we didn't call it that. My parents didn't talk about it that. They were like, she's shy. And sure, I was shy, but it was like a little bit like beyond just shy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think like part of that purpose is to just I don't want teens to struggle and not know what's going on for them and just kind of be in the dark or think that there's something wrong with them. Because I don't believe that's the case. And I think if we are all contributing and doing our part to help our teens learn how to manage the ups and downs, that they're gonna get through life a little bit better, won't
Hmm.
struggle as much.
Yeah. And we were just talking too before you came in
Yeah.
that, and I was telling her that I was an anxious teen. I am anxious. I'm an anxious person. But
I
back
wouldn't have known
then,
that about you.
yeah,
That's
and that's the
interesting.
thing is that you would never know. But back then, it's like no one touched on it. No one, you feel like you're not normal because it's not normalized. No one talks about it. So now that, that's great that you're wanting to help teens do that because that's probably, excuse me, probably one of the problems that they're going through is that they feel so alone and they think that they're not normal.
Yeah, definitely. Like this idea that like I'm the only one who's going through this,
Mhm.
or my thing is like it's bigger, or is there something wrong with me, as
Yeah.
opposed to like actually most teens I think are probably dealing with some sort of
Yeah.
like questioning, like
Ye-
all kinds of different things.
Do you think that if so we talk about childhood trauma here all the time, and
Yeah.
like we're trying to be aware of our own. Do you think that if that will contribute to, obviously it did for us, contribute as an to adulthood,
Hmm.
and it would cause more problems when you grow up if you haven't addressed it as a teen?
If you haven't addressed it,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, we're forming who we are as children. A lot of that is happening in our younger years, and so if we're not able to kind of like work through our stuff or process it or make meaning of what those situations meant to us, it's definitely going to kind of come back. I think there is an amount of like I hear often that I'm just pushing it to the side. I'm just going to move on. I'm going to forget about it. I'm going to push it to
Hmm.
the side. And then I also hear a lot of like, I've tried that, but it's not working. So why isn't it working? Well, we have to create like cohesion to our story. So it has to make sense to us. And
So there's this saying, you can't teach old dogs new tricks.
oh yeah,
Do you think that is so, and you can't change someone? Like, I mean, from like adolescent, a teen, and then grown, and then you're like senior. Do you want to say senior? Do you think that that's the case? Like, or do you think that generation is a little bit more open in talking to to their kids,
hmm,
or they're just like, no, you can't. There's nothing you could do to change their minds. Like, how do you deal with that?
yeah. So do you mean like in terms of like as we get older, if we can?
Yeah.
I mean, there's tons of research that tells us that our brain's like still developing well into our 20s, like up to 25. There's still a ton of
Really?
yeah neuroplasticity, and then beyond that, right? We can so technically, I mean, I think that we can always change. Does it get harder as we get older and more set in our ways? I do think that. I mean, I can even speak for myself in some things. There's just some things that I just don't have the patience for that I
Yeah.
Yeah.
used to, or I'm just like, I don't feel like tolerating that. So I think as we get older, it's a little bit harder to maybe change our ways,
Hmm.
but I certainly think it's always possible.
Wait, so that means I can say, sorry, I did that thing. My brain is still growing. So I'm going to
You're
start
gonna use
using
that
that.
now.
I'll be like, oh, I'm sorry. I'm still developing in
I'm
other
sorry, it's like
ways.
neuroplasticity.
Under construction. Under
I
construction.
like that. I'm going to use that.
So Chantal, there is a really scary statistic out there. 1 in 18 girls between the ages of 12 to 19 suffer from severe depression. And is that the same ratio as in male teens? And why do you think it affects our teens at such a young age?
Yeah, it's so the statistic from when I last checked, it's a slightly different for teen girls than it is for teen boys, so it's a little bit lower. But it's quite common, and it's actually a global statistic,
Oh my God.
which is really interesting, right? It's
Yeah.
not something that's just happening, say, in our backyard. It's happening all over the place. And so, why is it happening? Well, I mean, there's tons of reasons why I think, but there's a lot of factors. Our kids are bombarded with a ton of stimulus, a ton of information, um, right? Like think about how much time they spend on their phone and what they have access to, which is something that previous generations didn't have in the same
Hmm.
way. And so it's like their brain is like constantly hammered with all this stuff, and it's still developing. So it's still a young brain. It's still a brain that operates a lot on its emotion centers, the kind of like thinking, rationalizing,
Yeah.
judging part of the brain is not fully developed, and
Yeah.
so you just shoot all this information to this brain that's like emotion fired, and ask them to like make sense of the world. It's
Mhm.
it's a pretty big kind of thing that we're throwing at them.
Right. Like we can't even make sense of the world most of the time, like as adults.
That's true. Like sometimes I forget. Well, my son, 15, he's 15. Sometimes I forget that he's just 15, but he does understand. I feel like when I look back at it, I advanced him so much into um to be a bit older, like the way he thinks, the way he speaks, and it's crazy because now I think about it and I'm like, oh my God, is this why he does X, Y, Z sometimes, or he just can't regulate or express how he feels, and he like sometimes shuts down. Um, do you think that, like my story, parents contribute to their children's anxiety or depression without even knowing it?
Hmm. That's a good question. I mean, I think that information is out there. And so I think I don't know that I think that parents are doing a disservice by having those conversations with their kids. I think if anything, they're potentially offering them a safe place to talk about it,
Hmm.
right? Because they're going to be hearing about it and seeing about it with their peers, with the social issues that are and global issues that are pumped on TikTok or Snapchat or
Hmm.
whatever it is that they're connected to, right?
Yeah.
And so I don't know that's necessarily contributing. I think it might, done in a certain way, might create a safe space for them to start to like be able to reflect on some of that or like tease it apart because it's a lot of stuff.
Mhm. So then, for the kids that don't know how to articulate what they're feeling, and let's say they are anxious or depressed or whatever, and like what sorts of signs can parents be aware of if their children aren't going to be vocal about it, or they think something's wrong but they don't want to say it because they think that's just something internal? Like what kind of signs can we look for in our teens?
Yeah, that might let you know that, hey, something's up.
Hmm.
I mean, I think that it's going to look a little bit different depending on your child, their temperament, their kind of personality. Some of the things that I say to parents to kind of look for is like for major changes in behaviors, things that, and of course they're teens, so they're always probably changing.
Yeah.
But just if you've got a really social teen and suddenly they're super recluse and they're always in their room, you may want to check in. It could just be that hey, they're doing a little bit of that pulling away, or maybe they're socializing with their friends and they just want a private space to do that.
Hmm.
But I think there's no harm in checking in if you notice any kind of, or maybe your teen is a really quiet person and suddenly they're getting out there and going out a lot and meeting a lot of new people. And it's not necessarily something to be concerned about, but something to pay attention to. So if you notice any kind of changes, it doesn't have to be socially necessary, but it can be changes around like food behavior or school academics, socially.
Mhm.
There's a lot of conflict in the family, like lots of arguing and stuff, and that wasn't the case before. So these are the types of things that you can kind of start to pay attention to.
Oh,
I'm just curious though, like,
Yeah,
how do you check in? Because, like, for me,
yeah.
my daughter's 4, as opposed to Har's son, who's 15. I'm scared shitless of the teen years. But, like, how do you check in? And what is a proper, like, is there a proper way to check in? Because for me, growing up, it's if my parents, I don't think my parents ever did check in. And if they did, I was like, I would feel like they were prying. I'd be like, get out of my room or whatever, right? So, how do you go about that? Like, what do you do?
uh, so Jaden spends a lot of time in his room, um, uh, and I think I'm a bit more forgiving today than I have been in just before COVID, um, because there was a lot of changes. I'll check in if I'm like, oh my God, it's noon. He's not even downstairs. He hasn't come down to say good morning or anything. So I'll knock on the door, but and say, hey, like, what's up? Like, are you hungry? Are you, like I'm starting to find like I shouldn't be super intrusive in his space because that's what we've been practicing at home, um, is space and boundaries. And I think I wasn't vocal about my boundaries, which that story, actually the story where I like literally lost my shit on Jaden and I called Giselle and I was like screaming at the top of my lung and I was like, how dare he like fucking ungrateful and like it like I was like out of my body. I've never said that and I was like crying and she was like, are you okay? I was like, I can't be. Um, uh, yeah, the whole boundary to check in if he's okay, but I also tell him like I'm not perfect. Like just know that. I also need check-ins too, and it's hard. It really is hard. Like I didn't think, and I always told my parents like I'm gonna be a cool mom. Like this is like a different level of like I've given him space. Like sometimes I'm kind of like, should I just say the way that my parents said to be like, you do as I say, because I'm the parent. I don't want to resort to that, but I'm thinking, well, should I? I mean, I turned out just fine. Like, am I screwing up my child? But yeah, those are little check-ins. If I don't hear, and I think every couple hours, especially if he's not home, I'm like checking in all the time. And and for all the parents, like even for preteen, like I think you should just make a habit of that even before they're going to teenagers. Set the expectations of like quick little check-ins. You don't need to know every detail, and I always tell them, but yeah, I think it just becomes a habit of like checking in with you.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm even thinking for myself and my teen and how I check in, and I think it's like it's so crazy because it's mood dependent, right? There might be some moments where I go into his room and I'm like knock knock, thinking like, hey, how you doing? He'll be like, get out. And then there'll be other moments when it's like knock knock, same thing. I think I'm consistent. Hey, how you doing? Like, yeah, I'm good. You want to go play basketball? Yes, let's do that. So I think like some. Right. I think when you were saying like how do you check in, I think like to kind of be like authentic with what works for you as a parent and not to give up if it like backfires, because it is going to be like if they're having a rough moment or they're just not in the mood to socialize, or you might be like, I asked one too many questions there, and it just kind of happens. You just kind of have to like, okay, you know what, I'm gonna keep checking in.
I don't want to scare you, but having a teenager is kind of like Jekyll and Hyde. I'm serious. Like 1 minute you're like your chummy buddies, and then next minute, actually just happened with Jaden. Like we were choking, and then all of a sudden he's like, "You just killed my mood," and I was like, "How the fuck did I just kill the mood? We were joking, and he just got triggered about something, and then I was saying like, well, you know what? If you can have that attitude, you're just gonna be and then I just stopped myself, and I'm like, okay, Harleen, just chill out. Like, give him a minute. And then the next minute, like 20 minutes later, he comes downstairs. He's like, look at this underwear that I have, Mom. It had holes because he knows. Like, I was like, why do you have holy underwear? It's like he just does it to like joke with me, and we were perfectly fine. And I was like,
What happened?
what? I like this as a teen. I feel like I'm on an emotional roller coaster, probably like them too, because I'm like, I don't know. So my next question for you, as I was leading into something, is, uh, Jaden struggled with this too, but I'm pretty sure most teenagers has, like people at school and their behavior. He's always trying to do the right thing, and then of course they have friends that aren't doing the right thing, and he's kind of getting pressured to doing things. And let's face it, some kids are mean. Like I was a mean child. I'm going to freely admit that. So I feel like sometimes it's karma. And he just says, I always tell him, it's like, well, they're not your friends. So I try to give him advice, and he's like, you don't understand. Like, how do you help your child when they're going through something at school, and you don't, when they just say that, and it's like, yeah, you don't get it.
Mm-hmm.
What do you do? What do you say?
Yeah, so I think as parents we get the "you don't get it" label starting at what, age 9 maybe nowadays.
God.
Like, I think that's one where there's a couple of things about it. One of them is like kind of coming up with a version of, well, help me understand. So your
Right.
own version of how you might ask that question. I like to literally ask it just like that. Help me understand. And sometimes that opens a door, and sometimes it's like I roll and no, we're done. But the idea being that you express that you want to. So it's like really leading with like curiosity and just like having that desire to show up for them, no matter what. If they want to share or they don't want to share, just knowing that you are that safe space to be able to do that.
Yeah.
Um,
So we all know about this little thing called COVID-19.
Ugh.
Have you guys heard of it?
I
So
didn't. No, I'm just kidding.
as much as we want to put it behind us, it literally shook the world. And like, have you noticed an influx in teens coming to you during this time?
Yeah, I think yes, I have, and I think it was just like the themes of like reasons why people were coming was pretty consistent. Like just a sense of like feeling completely unmotivated or like utterly stressed and anxious, and those were like the three kind of revolving things, and it took the form of different things, but it came down to like those three things. Yeah, COVID really kicked a lot of teen butts.
Mhm.
It was tough.
So speaking of
Yeah.
kicking teens' butts for sure, because I feel like at home, for me, a lot of things arose like because there's too much thinking.
Yeah.
We like all slow down, and obviously that our kids are that too. What happens when you're also like your mental capacity is taking a toll, like your mental health is taking a toll while your child is too? Like, how can you support your child when you feel like you're just trying to get through the day and you're just like, I don't know how to even help you?
Mhm.
Like, you're almost like giving up.
Yeah. It's so tough. And it's like the reality, right? Is that it didn't just kick teen butts, it flipped everyone's world
Yeah.
upside down. I think part of it is about modeling that we're human
Hmm.
and that sometimes we struggle, right? Like we don't have to be perfect. We don't have to. We might aspire to be right, like a
Yeah.
supportive parent or whatever. But the truth is, we're real. We have emotions. We have bad days, good days, and I believe that there's value in that authenticity.
Yeah.
And so if if you lose your shit, there's still room for apology and checking back in. Like I didn't necessarily show up the way I wanted to.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But I think there's a lot of value in being an authentic parent and showing our kids, like modeling that, hey, sometimes things are tough and sometimes we don't show up as the best versions of ourselves, and what else can we do, kind of thing.
Mhm. So to kind of snowball off that, then,
Yeah.
let's say we have another wave. Let's say, and everything goes into lockdown again, and this isn't going to be anyone's first rodeo anymore, right? But do you have any other tips, like since you have seen an influx in teens coming to you during the pandemic, do you have any tips or advice for parents and teens if we were to slip into another pandemic, like lockdown?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Let me think about this because even you just saying that like made my like chest like tighten up. I was like,
You're like
woo.
locked
Yes,
down.
I don't want to
Stop.
do that
I
at
know.
We
all.
just took our masks off.
Okay. Yeah. I think like for teens, because a lot of it was about feeling super unmotivated and having a lot of loss around things that they normally would do. So whether that was like a sport that they were into or a club or something, or
Like
even
grad.
yeah, grad,
Oh.
like things that they were really like missing out on, would be for them to, and I think a lot of teens have started to do this, but it's to, like discover things that they're passionate about and that they care about, like different hobbies, different interests, for them to really have like something that for them is something that like brings them to life. That's really important. So I think that would be like one thing, and it may not be something they can necessarily get out and do like in a formal way. Like they might not be going out to do a sport, but maybe I don't know, maybe they're like really passionate into music or something, and they start looking deeper into that. So I think like that is one thing that I would say, getting really connected to their peers and their social things, and for parents to also understand, and I know that means an uptake in their phones, but that is their livelihood if they are in isolation. Like that's their connection to their peers,
Mhm.
and so perhaps for parents to have an understanding and maybe use some flexibility around those types of things to allow their teens to continue to connect with people. For parents to also have like a place to vent and to like say the stuff that they may not want to say directly to their teen, but
Yeah.
the fact is like you can have different thoughts and feelings and moments where you're gonna be like, "Ah, I can't do this," or
Yeah.
whatever is and
Yeah.
yeah, to have a space to be able to say that,
Mhm.
I think it's really important.
Totally.
So speaking of, there's certain things you want to say but shouldn't say, or you don't mean to say at the
Oh,
time.
here we go.
So
There's a story here.
there's always a story with
Always.
her. So I always encourage Jaden to ask whatever question he wants.
Mhm.
I mean, I think the one time, I think he also took it out of context. Uh, he's like, do you think that he asked me, he's like, do you think you were able to do everything that you wanted to do like before you had me? And I said, no. Like I was literally honest and I was like, no, like I had hopes, dreams, aspirations, like just like everybody else, but I got pregnant. And then Jaden spun it around and he's like, well, that, like, why'd you even have, and I was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Like, it was just like, how, if you're trying to explain something to your child, like, should you even be explaining it, or should you, that's like just a territory you shouldn't even touch because they're not fully capable of understanding, like, the situation.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard. It's hard to like. There's no black and white around that in the sense of like, right? Like it was you said something and then it was interpreted in a different way. And
Yeah.
I think that our children are people, right? So they're going to interpret information in different. So even if you filtered yourself, like filtered the crap out of yourself and everything you said, you'd still mess up because
Mhm.
Yeah.
that is a part of being a parent, right?
Mhm.
Like we're human, we make mistakes. So I think on the one hand, I would say, um, sure, you may want to be mindful of like, you might want to not say something like, I hate you, right? Or maybe you do.
Well, I
I
mean,
don't
they
know.
say that to us, so why can't
Yeah,
I
they
say it
do.
back? No, I'm
I
just
know,
kidding. I would
right?
never. First of all, Jaden's probably going to be watching. I would never say that to you. I would say, I hate what you're doing right now. Don't say that, but I don't hate you.
I hate how you're making me feel.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I feel like having a teen, I'm always treading every day about something. Like, I, I feel like it's just like, do I say something? Do I not say something? Should I just let it go?
Yeah.
Because I feel like sometimes if I let it go, it's like, oh, it just eats me up inside. And then it just turns into like, oh, you don't trust me, or you don't like, how can you create trust between you and your teen, especially when one, sex is going to come into play, and you have conversations with them about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Trust. I mean, I think you alluded to communication a little earlier, and I think that is like a super important kind of like pillar when it comes to parenting. And we're not like necessarily formally taught how like communication skills. It's not like we
Oh,
necessarily,
God.
right? We don't really
Yeah.
learn that in school. We learn it from our own kind of
You learn the
childhood.
hard
We
way.
learn the hard way, yeah. And I think that communication skills is, like I said, is such a pillar because
Yeah.
we need to be as clear as we can, and that will be a helpful tool, right? Clear on our expectations, clear on our rules, clear on our privileges, responsibilities, consequences, and at the same time, we're still kind of learning those as we go.
Yeah.
Because it's like like for your 4-year-old, you probably have very different expectation rules and whatnot as opposed to like for
Oh,
a
yeah.
15-year-old.
Oh,
And,
yeah.
right? I even know for my kids, they've got 5 years apart, so it's like what I expect of one is quite different
Yeah.
from what I might expect from the other, and it's always changing. And so it's like being clear on it, and then also you're kind of like trying to keep up with like, okay, we're course correcting here because that didn't work. So I think like part of parenting is yes having that communication, and then I think is like about being forgiving and compassionate with ourselves
Mhm.
as we are learning these things.
Yeah.
I think that will really build some trust with your team. And like something that I've been learning is like have lots of conversations and snippets. Big long sit down kind of conversations about points that we want to drive home
Mm-hmm.
seem to be super ineffective.
And I know that like I just asked about the whole sex thing and stuff.
Yeah.
Do you think like as parents you should like, when we were growing up, it's like, don't have sex, don't do it,
Don't talk about sex.
don't talk about sex,
Don't watch sex on
don't-
TV.
don't whatever. And I just feel like yes, you should talk about it, because do you think like we should talk about it and say, hey, listen, you're gonna do what you're gonna do anyways, or should you just say, no, you shouldn't have sex, but or is it even better to say, here, be informed, you're just gonna make your decision anyways?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, there's never a right or wrong or
Mm.
whatever, but I'm trying to understand that
That part.
part of,
Yeah.
you know.
My approach is like with a lot of things, and that includes the topic of sex, is that like anything is on the table for discussion. I do a couple of things, like this is just my personal approach with this, and some parents may not agree with this, right? But my approach is to say anything's on the table, anything we want to talk about. I will bring up some topics here and there whenever there's like kind of a natural point to insert, like whether we're watching a movie or there was a comment that was made somewhere, or they told me about an experience or something that someone was doing at school. Like, okay, maybe that's something I can like insert a little bit of curiosity or maybe a little bit of information. Um, that is the way that I kind of approach things. That's the way that I talk to the parents that I work with as well. So there may be a parent that has like for them there is a hard and fast kind of value around like don't have sex, and that's the message I'm giving. The the concern with that, I think, for me is that our teens are maybe going to do it anyways,
Oh yeah.
and would you rather know that they are safe, that they're informed, that they're making the best choices with the information they have, or would you rather kind of like not for them rather to not be equipped with that
Right.
information, and then maybe it goes sideways. So
Yeah.
that's where I kind of err on the side of information.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah. So I just want to take this opportunity to give a quick special shout out to our sponsor for today's episode, which is Lee Family Dental, where their commitment is to provide the best possible dental care for your family using the newest technology and following the highest standards that they can. And did we mention that they're run by 3 badass moms who are all sisters? So check out Lee Family Dental at www.leefamilydental.ca.
Check them out. They're like the cutest.
They're awesome.
Yeah. So I don't want to be morbid, but I feel like we don't talk about it enough. So we read on we Googled and checked out stats. So I read that boys die by suicide 2 to 3 times often than girls. And in 2015, Stats Canada reported that 14%, it could be higher now, 14% male ages 15 to 19 commit suicide, and 6% were females. Death rises sharply for males when they reach in their 20s and beyond. So when I read this, it hit home so hard because one, I have a 15-year-old and he's he's struggled with certain things and he's reserved, and when he just says like I don't understand, like you don't get it, you don't do, when he shares certain things, it scares me sometimes. And I've had other people in my family who are teenagers share that. It's scary. Sometimes I can't sleep at night because I'm just like, I need to check up. I need to make sure do you think we have enough resources for teens and their mental health, especially because we talk about men's mental health quite a bit.
Besides you.
Besides you. There's not a lot. By the way, I Googled
Yeah,
teen psychologist. You guys are a rare breed.
that's interesting to know.
No, I'm
Yeah.
serious. And based on I like to do homework. And I never liked to do homework back then, but like being very, very specialized. Like I said, you guys are a rare breed.
I mean, to like speak to your question about like resources and stuff, I think we can always do better. I think that like oftentimes my mind goes to let's have this in the education system as like stuff that we're just constantly talking about, right? And so the topics of mental health and mental well-being and stuff, to me it's like let's make that like daily talk, the way that you might talk about like a fractured wrist or an injured body part, right? Like what do you do, and who do you speak to, and how can you take care of yourself? And I think that that's really important. And so I definitely think that we can always do better when it comes to like upping the resources that are available to our teens. Yeah.
Yeah, and so we also read that teens are admitted to the hospital for suicide attempts more than any other age group, which is, like I said, I'm terrified of my child becoming a teen. So, like, what can we do as parents to equip our teens and ourselves to make sure that they do have a safe space to talk about self-harm? Like you said, they don't really talk about it in school. Now, I don't know,
No.
but it's funny because we have all these different podcast episodes about teen bullying, and everyone says the same thing, is that I don't think schools are doing enough.
I don't think so
So
either.
if that is placed at home and it starts with us,
Yeah.
like how do we open that door for conversation? It's kind of scary, right?
It's kind of scary. It is scary. One of the resources and tools that I use is social media, and I encourage parents to use that. And so what I mean by that is like anytime that there is, you know, like there are shows on Netflix that are like the whole premise of it is talking about topics like self-harm and suicide,
Yep.
right? And it comes up a lot in social media in different ways. So I think that that can be such a place to like start off a conversation, or at least to like to you know bring it up like, oh, okay, this is happening, so let's kind of talk about this a little bit. um, I also think that like starting as young as possible, and if people are coming to me, then they likely already have a teen. But I think even when our kids are young, and of course we want to be developmentally appropriate, we don't want to terrify our kids, but to be able to talk about death and dying and different things like that, so that our kids have that capacity to kind of to understand, but also to use language and talk about like feelings and talk about our emotions and what we're thinking and stuff. So I think that the earlier that we're having conversations and normalizing things, the better off our kids are. With that being said, I think also there are things like there's a program out in Calgary here, that Assist, and they do suicide prevention training, and they have different courses for, they have some for parents, they have some for the public, they have some for youth as well. And I think that it's worth investing in educating our youth, so that they can have a sense. Because I think another thing that I've seen a lot of is teens who have friends who are contemplating suicide or who are really struggling with that. And the teen is the safe person that that person goes to. And then they're with this heavy burden, worried about their friend who's not doing so well. And that has an impact on everyone, like on the teen, it has an impact on the family. And so just considering, you know, education is important as well, and how we might educate our teens to be able to talk about this stuff and also know what to do.
Yeah. So we all know the rising cost of living. Inflation. Our gas is like $1.40. What the hell? I talk about gas prices all the time. My God, I'm old.
That's a dad thing.
Yeah, I do play both roles. So people don't often seek help because they can't afford it, or money's an issue, or like obviously there's resources out there for families to reach out in the event they don't have benefits or have run out of benefits. Like
Yeah.
what? And this is not a jab at anybody. Maybe it is. But w- there's lots of resources there, but they just don't have the capacity or the bandwidth to help everybody.
Mm.
So, what do you think we can do to help these people? Because there is a massive influx of people that have mental health
For sure.
issues, and like some people don't even know that their teens have it.
Mm-hmm.
So, what kind of resources are out there that like is a that you know that is
Yeah.
like a really good one for them to go to?
And I completely agree, like with the bandwidth piece, right? Because there
Yeah.
are some good resources out there. I think the Distress Center and Kids Help Phone, and
Yeah.
even if you just hop on 211, there's a lot of places that will offer affordable or low cost counseling, which is it's great that those resources do exist, and can support youth. And the issue then becomes like when those resources are tapped out or when they have wait lists and stuff, and,
Yeah.
and that youth is needing support in kind of like a quicker, more immediate way. Or even hospitals. I think during COVID, what I was hearing from a lot of youth is they would go to get admitted, and the wait times there were incredible, or they weren't able to stay very long because they didn't have beds available. Or so it certainly there is a lot of pressure on the system. You know, I say to folks to use their voice and to advocate, to let their government know about things. So like write a letter, write an email, because I think for psychologists, one of the things that has been kind of in conversation is about making the mental health component be a part of services that are available to folks. So the way that we here in Alberta don't have to pay to go see the doctor, that would be kind of covered in some way. So I think that there are different ways of looking and strategizing how can we offer mental health to the masses, right? To folks. And I think it's important for people to use their voices and let people know. Yeah.
So I want to circle back to what you offer,
Sure.
because It's very interesting, the methods that you take when it comes to teen uh, psychology. So you offer in-person, online therapy, expressive arts therapy, walk and talk, and you offer the teen life coaching program. So can you elaborate a little bit more on those methods and why they work particularly for teens?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Um, stuff like the walk and talk and the expressive arts, specifically, I think that those work well because I don't know if you've ever had this moment where you're like sitting and you're talking to a teen and you're like in a parallel kind of setting. So it's like you're either sitting in the car or you're taking a walk or you're just like not facing them.
Yeah, it's
Um,
hard for teens to sit and talk to you face
I
to face.
know, they're
Yeah,
like adult and
I
they're
get
asking all
it.
these
Yeah,
serious questions. So I think there's something really, really key about having that kind of like
yeah,
parallel conversation that can just bring some ease to the conversation.
yeah, makes sense.
And so some teens really, really like that way of doing it, as well as like, just this idea of like kind of like sitting in this office and talking about really serious stuff can sometimes feel quite intimidating. So just being outdoors, it kind of, it does feel a little more casual, I think, for the teens who have done the walk and talk and said like, this is why I like it. And then there's something just really good about moving our bodies.
Mm-hmm.
And I think like our generations are more and more sedentary. They're spending a lot more time not moving.
Yeah.
And so the more we can get our youth moving, the better it is for them overall, their mood and everything. So that's in particular why the walk and talk, the expressive arts is just a way of utilizing like creativity that teens already have, right? Like teens listen to music for the most part. Some teens will do some journaling or creative writing. Some like to draw, paint, and they're doing these things anyways. And so it's like using and tapping into that imagination, that creativity for them to be able to give a voice to their thoughts, their feelings, their experiences. It's almost like a different way of being able to process things.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes that can also be uh, another way of being vulnerable. Like it's easier to maybe for some to like paint out something than to say like I am feeling.
Yeah.
I think that can be really really hard for some youth. So to be able to have like another vehicle to help them do that
Yeah.
is really powerful.
So how do you determine then what type or method you're going to use for each kid, or do you just go through each one kind of like process of elimination, like let's try this, let's try that, or do they come to you specifically with something and you're like, oh, I know exactly what method I'm going to use? How do
Right.
you know?
I kind of do like a little bit of asking. So
Mhm.
checking in like like what do you like to do? I like to ask them like what are some things that interest them? What are some things that they do in their spare time? How are some ways that they typically express themselves? Like
Mhm.
how do they deal with their tough stuff? And if there's anything that kind of if they're like, oh, I paint or draw or journal or anything like that, I might say like, are you open to maybe using that in therapy? And are you open to hearing what that would look like? If they say yes, I'll give them a little rundown and we might try something out. And I always check in and say like, how was that for you? And sometimes they'll be like, that was okay. Sometimes they'll be like, that was great. I want to do that again. And sometimes they might be like, yeah. And then we don't use
Yeah.
that kind of way. Yeah. So I often will ask and offer a few different ways and then give teens choice because
Mhm.
I think they're also it's a space for them to share their opinions which matters as well.
Interesting.
So,
Hmm.
as we all know, teens are, hey, how's school? Good.
Good.
This, like
Fine.
1, 2, 3 word answers. Um, Obviously, when they come sit with you, you probably get that your first session, or you feel like you're like trying to pry it out. So, without divulging your secrets, w- how do you get them to open up to you? Because they obviously have to trust you.
Hmm.
Um, and the reason why I ask this is because my girlfriend actually was looking for a therapist for her teen son,
Hmm.
and she was like, I was really surprised because she said he's fine, he's good. It's just the motions of whatever. And I just laughed and I said, Really? Like, it took one session for him to like that there's nothing wrong because he did say that he sometimes feels like when he's driving, he wants to take his car and hit it into a barricade, which was translated to the therapist at the time because he was still having those thoughts. So I mean, how do we find one that's going to work for us as a therapist? I mean, I'm being biased, so everybody should get Chantal. But how do you find the right therapist for you? Because I don't think it takes just one session for someone to say, like, Or do you think that there's just so many influx of people coming that it's kind of like, like, trying to filter and cycle through everyone just coming in and out? I don't know.
Yeah. Um, I mean, I guess in terms of when you were saying like the prying piece, I think like one thing I wanted to, like one thing that dropped in for me was even for myself as a parent versus a therapist, the conversations that I have with teens are very different. So I think there's something to be said about when a teen is coming to see a therapist, and I'm going to say of their own volition. If you've got a teen who's like feeling like they're forced to come or coerced, then it's a different story, different ballgame altogether. But if a teen is wanting to come to therapy, generally speaking, they're coming with a willingness to talk. If there's a willingness and an invitation to listen and create that safe space. So the one word answers, I don't get a ton of those, but when I do, it's often like someone who just doesn't want to be there. That might be when that kind of shows up the most, I would say. In terms of like rapport building, so building that trust, that's like super key. And I don't know, I think every therapist probably has their style. But for me, when I'm sitting in a room with a person, no matter who they are, I am like 100% present and focused to them, I'm curious, and I just want to know about them, and I show up with that, and that's kind of what's important to me. So I want to know about them, and I authentically want to know about them. Like I want to know, like, what are they like? What are they into? What are you listening to? Like who are your key people? And I really authentically mean that, and I think that teens generally respond well to that because they want to tell you about who they are. They want to be witnessed. They want to, they want to be known. And so I think that's answering a part of your question, but not fully your question. If parents are like looking for a therapist, I think it's important to look for someone who has experience working with youth, who specializes in that to some degree, because it's a different conversation. It's different to talk to, a child versus a teen versus a parent.
Yeah.
So you really want to have someone who's just kind of like, who cares about working with that population.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So going back to what you said about how you don't really get a lot of the one-word answers because generally it has to be somebody who wants to be there. So let's say you have a teen who you think would benefit from having these talks because even growing up, there was a stigma behind seeing
A
a
therapist.
therapist,
Yeah.
right? See, but as adults, we're just like, I want to see a therapist because we know how to act. We know what we want. We know what might help, but teens don't. And there could still be that stigma. So how do you come across as like how do you talk to a teen about seeing somebody without making it seem like, oh, you need to see a therapist? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
because back then, I don't know about you, but it was a stigma to see a therapist.
I never heard of a therapist like
Yeah.
in my like being a teenager.
Yeah.
Like I'm sure my parents had benefits, but that was one they probably
That was
didn't.
something that you would never be like, I think I should see a therapist. You know what I mean?
No.
I don't know how it is now with the generation, but like with me, I didn't see my first therapist until like late 20s,
Yeah.
which really helped. And I wish I had known that back then. But it's because no one really put emphasis on the fact that it's okay to see a therapist. Doesn't mean that anything's wrong with you. It might just mean that you might want to talk to somebody, or you know what I mean? Like how do we talk to them about that it's okay to do that?
Yeah. I mean, I think you just like nailed it on the head when you said it. Like, it's okay. There's nothing wrong with you. I think that there is still a lot of stigma.
Yeah.
And although I think it's there, we've made some gains there, and there's certainly like more and more teens, or at least that's been my experience, that are asking to come and see a therapist. There's still a lot of stigma of like, this means I'm broken, or there's something wrong with me, or there's something that needs to be fixed with me. And so I think just being, really, really clear on like, what is the purpose of going to see a therapist? What does that mean?
Yeah.
Is really important. On one of the blogs that I've written, I kind of address like some of the common like FAQs that come up for teens, and I think like we kind of talk about that piece, because sometimes there are some things of like, what does it mean if I go see a therapist? Does that mean they're going to share everything with you as my parent, and that could be concerning? Or like, what if I say something that gets me in trouble or gets my parents in trouble? And so there are some like common kind of concerns that might feel like barriers for teens. And so part of that can be like as a parent trying to understand what those barriers are and what is the thing that might be preventing them from asking for that kind of help. And then, for some, therapy may just not be the way that they are going to work through their stuff, and that's okay too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we polled our audience and asked questions.
Yes. I don't know if
Um,
you saw that on Instagram today, but we
yeah.
usually ask if any of our followers want to ask our guests questions.
okay,
So
okay.
we had a couple that
Yeah,
kind of came in.
we had a couple of questions. So the first one is anxiety and or depression hereditary?
Mm. It can be, yes, it is, and also it's not the only factor. So if someone in the family has a mental illness of any kind, right, it increases the chances that there would be a child or someone in the family that may have it, but it's not the only factor that determines. So there is kind of that environment versus genetics kind of piece at play.
Is it because of like the imbalance more so because it's being passed down, like you said, genetically? Or is it because of what's happening in the household?
Right? Yeah. Is it a learned behavior or yeah?
Yeah, so it's kind of like
Yeah, I think it's one of those questions, right? And it's hard to know like for sure, but
Mhm.
certainly if you've got like a parent who has anxiety, you're going to experience that growing up, and so a lot of those thoughts or behaviors or different things that are happening,
yeah.
you're going to see that, and so that's how you're going to learn to manage your own experiences.
Sorry, I just thought of something
Yeah.
because before I had a kid, I had a dog, and so when I was going through training and trying to understand like my dog, they were saying that the behavior that you exhibit and the energy you give off is what your dog's gonna feel.
Right.
And like I told you before, I'm a very anxious person, so I'm like, fuck, I'm gonna make my dog anxious. And there's times where I am anxious, and I can kind of see the change of behavior in my dog. She'll be like, oh, what's going on? She can't relax if I can't relax, and I'm like, shit, right? So does that ring true for kids too? Like, if I'm being anxious around my kid, is my kid gonna pick up on that and be like, oh shit, mom's anxious, and what do I do? And then they get anxious too. Like, I'm genuinely curious because I am a stress case a lot.
Yeah. I mean, I think yes and no. So I'm thinking of myself. This is maybe a silly example, but my mom is like terrified of bees, like
Hmm.
terrified. She'll like leave the room, run away, kind of
Yeah.
whatever it takes. Like, yeah, won't be around them. And I grew up being like so scared of these bees, and I had like no reason. I've never been stung. Nothing bad has ever happened to me in a bee. But I think like I saw my mom being terrified of bees, and then my
You're
mind
like,
was like, okay, bees are
Oh,
scary.
yeah.
yeah.
So for sure there are things, and then as an adult, anyways, I've made peace with my bees. I'm okay with bees. But I mean, at the end of the day, yeah, we do learn a lot from our parents. Our parents are our models for a lot of different things, and so if we see a parent who is highly anxious a lot of the time, chances are that we're going to learn that that's how we work through things, like how we work through our thoughts and our emotions. Is like, okay, anxiety is like, okay, this is how we do things. So there is some component of it that is learned, and on the other side, um, I think that you can have an anxious parent and a non-anxious parent, and the child could develop anxiety or not develop anxiety. So there are other factors at play, right? There's going to be like the child's temperament. There will be other models in their life that they will look up to as well. And so I think I'm saying that because I don't want like parents to hear like, oh, another thing for me to like watch out for and filter and try and be
Yeah.
like perfect
Yeah.
because I that weight of like everything you do is going to impact your child.
Yeah.
No, like I mean there is an influence, but it's not the only thing. I'm talking with my hands. I hope this doesn't make clicky
No,
things.
no, you're good.
No, like I'm just
Hard talks with the hands all the time.
I'm always like all over. Like I'm trying to just be like
Yeah, sit on your
"Hey,
hands.
but hard." So today my hands are not going everywhere. Like I'm like literally like paying attention. Like it was like Jaden's kindergarten teacher. That's how Chantal is. I'm like just mesmerized by her. Like that's like a good thing because you're like keeping me calm and keeping me like focused.
See,
'cause
your
usually-
energy is rubbing off on her.
because I'm usually like, oh
That's funny.
my god. We have another audience question.
Yes. So this person says, my daughter's 12 and is heavy into social media. And because social media plays a big part in anxiety in teens, how can I, as a parent, teach her how to use social media responsibly?
Yes. Oh man, social media, such a thing,
I know.
right? And
Double-edged sword.
and such a comparison machine. I think like there's just like as soon as you're on there,
Any age.
any age.
Any age. Doesn't
Yeah.
have to
We
be
talk
teens.
about that
yeah.
all the time.
All the time.
The rabbit hole.
Yeah.
Yes, it really is. Okay, so how to teach our teens to use that responsibly? Well, okay, I'm going to put a little pitch in for the modeling. I think that's like it's worth something. So if you're finding yourself like on social media all the time, just to be aware of that. So great, like what we do, our kids are watching us. I think another piece is to invite our teens to start like critically thinking about the things they're seeing. So whether that is, if you happen to be, with your teen while they're showing you something, you can make little comments or just like little observations about that. Like, oh, like, do you think that's actually true? Or like I'll have my teen come and tell me like these fun facts that he has learned from TikTok. I'm like, oh,
Oh,
interesting.
yeah. The
Okay.
TikTok hacks.
Right? And so the joke I say with him, and he rolls his eyes a little bit, but I'm hoping he uses like, did you fact check that with 3 other reputable sources? And he's like,
I
"Oh,
love that. I'm going to do
Mom."
that. Check.
But just like to invite like a little bit of critical thinking of like what they're seeing on there, I think is important because there's a lot of stuff that they might be seeing, and my mind's going to like body image and stuff because I think for teens, teen girls in particular, that's so prevalent, right? Of all these filters or these images and these beauty standards that are very impossible to achieve, but our teens are constantly exposed to them. So getting them to critically think about it, taking social media breaks, which I know is not super popular, but it's really important for our teens to get off their screens, and do something like with the real world because it gives them another perspective. So I think that's a really important piece.
I actually have 2 questions. One, what is one of the TikToks that your son showed you that you do as a hack now? Have you tried one of them?
Yeah.
Which one? What was it?
I was like, oh, am I going to be able to come up with something? But there was like this egg peeling thing because we do like hard-boiled eggs. Yeah. And so you put it in a glass jar with a little bit of water and you shake it instead of like fighting with it.
Yeah.
And like,
Did it work?
Okay, the first one worked so well. And I was like really excited. I even called up to my husband. I was like, John, it's working. I was really, really excited. And then I put the second one in there and it pulverized the egg.
Oh.
It just like exploded in the jar everywhere. And I was like,
What did you do differently?
nothing. It was like a 50-50 chance of this thing working. So I'm like, is it better than me fighting with it and peeling a little bit? I think so. I stick to peeling, but I did try it.
Okay, well, it kind of worked, 50-50.
Kind of worked.
Yeah.
So on more of a serious question, everybody has to have a TikTok, like one thing that they do on TikTok. Okay, so we had a mom message us and say her family is blended, so she's got a new baby, and they have a toddler, and their spectrum's like all of it. So they have all age group.
Okay.
They feel like, their daughter complains how she feels like she's always heavily like babysitting and just not being able to go hang out with her friends. Do you think it's really important, especially for parents that are in like a blended family or have all the age group, that we shouldn't expect our teenagers to be mini parents because you actually need help? They probably do need help. Like what can they do to make her feel like she's not being a mini parent?
For sure. That's a tough situation. And I think like even more so during COVID where there were maybe like less opportunities to get that support elsewhere.
Yeah.
My sense around that would be to, again, like back to that communication thing of being really clear with expectations and responsibilities and privileges and stuff. And maybe it's a point of communication around figuring out like what are the expectations that we have as parents? What are the places where it's feeling like really challenging for that teen, what are maybe some of the privileges that might come with some of those responsibilities? And then to be honest, there may be um, some spaces where that teen, like where a teen is not the right fit to be the one who's helping with the caregiving and stuff. And if it's, if it's rupturing the relationship, or if it's feeling like extremely stressful for that youth, I think it's really about also checking in around what are the impacts of that. And if it's like, well, it's kind of like ruining my social life, that might be different than like, this is causing me a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety. I don't like doing it. It's causing conflict between the siblings. So I think it's also about maybe checking in around like, what are they seeing as a result of this particular expectation that they're having of their teen.
Okay, last audience question. While I monitor my child's social media and ensure that they're using it responsibly, I noticed my niece made a TikTok about drugs. Should I be telling my brother about the TikTok she made, or should I mind my own business?
Ooh, well, they were kind of mindful, so they kind of weren't minding their business in the first place, right?
That's true.
That is a really good question. So I'm wondering about the relationship between, so again, I'd be curious about that relationship between, so this is the aunt and a teen?
I'm assuming.
Yeah, something
Yeah.
like that. Okay. So like perhaps, going to the teen first, if there's a relationship there, like the reason why they're on their TikTok, are they following their TikTok? Do they have a close relationship? I think that would be a good kind of place to start. And then yeah, like I think it's important for parents to know. So one thing that I have heard before from some relatives is giving the teen an opportunity to go to their parent first before kind of like stepping over that
Yeah.
boundary. So like, hey, saw this TikTok. Here's what I'm thinking about it, and I think you need to tell your parents. So why don't we say you tell them by Friday, and if you don't, then I'll have to have that conversation with them, kind of thing. That way you're not totally rupturing that relationship, because teens do need to have like adults that they can trust. They need to have people they can go to, and so you definitely don't want to completely rupture the relationship, but at the same time, you do want to keep them safe and make sure that that their parents are still engaged in part of the process, right?
Yeah.
So it's like giving that teen, empowering that teen to go and have that kind of like tough conversation with their parent.
Gotcha.
So, we're like almost out of time, and I literally had another question literally pop in my head. Like it's always we never have enough time. So I'm gonna ask two questions. So one is obviously there's Chantal the psychologist and Chantal the mom. Obviously your teen's probably like, ugh, you're just being a psychologist with me today, because he obviously knows that's your profession. How do you distinguish between Chantal mom and Chantal the psychologist?
That's a good question. Sometimes I get called out on it, and that's how I distinguish it. It's like,
Okay.
mom,
You're using your psychologist voice again.
right? Like I feel like there's probably some weaving in like how I ask my questions, right? I ask a ton of open-ended questions because of my training and the work that
Yeah.
I do, and so I think that's like just how I show up as a parent. So I would ask that question, regardless. The psychologist mom and yeah, I think it's mainly like when he calls me out, when he's like, "Mom, don't like what you're doing there," or like you ask, do you ask that to your clients? Yes, and I still want to ask you. I maintain my question.
That's fair. That's totally
Fair,
fair.
yeah,
Totally
yeah.
fair. Obviously, young adults, teens, they're gonna go into their adulthood. What advice would you give young adults out there, when they're about to enter into a new chapter called adulthood?
Yeah. I would say, well, there's a few different things that I would say. How much time do I have? Okay. Well, one of the things that pops into my head is like disconnecting from your adults is like hazardous to your mental health. So have a trusting adult in your world as you kind of go into adulthood, because I think it's really good to have someone, and doesn't mean necessarily someone that you get along with all the time, but just someone that you can laugh with, or that maybe it's someone who gives really good advice, or maybe it's someone that celebrates wins with you. And make sure you have at least one person like that, if not three. The research says three people like that in your life, right? Adults, yeah.
I'm trying to
Are
think
you
my
like,
three
who
right
are my,
now.
who are my kids? Three people. I know. So that would be like one thing. Don't disconnect from your adults. There's also a concept that Daniel Siegel and David Rock put out there. They're neuroscientists, and they talk a lot about this idea of like a healthy mind platter. So taking a look at like 7 different areas that really promote better outcomes, like better emotional and psychological outcomes. And so having like teens going into adulthood, checking out like what does that look like for them. And so there's 7 of these components. There's downtime, there's play, there's sleep, movement, time in, focus time. I know I'm forgetting one. I'm going to check my notes. Connection time. That's the other one. Okay. So just checking in on those 7, and if you can Google that and they'll come up right away. But I think that's like a really good kind of exercise to run through and see like what is this looking like for me, and like where are things kind of like dominant, and where would I want to like kind of move things up for myself. Paying attention to your inner dialogue is a big one. Like what is the voice in your head saying, and just knowing there's like many parts of us at many different times, right?
Yeah.
And so is the inner critic running the show, or is the one that's always saying what if, is that the one that's running the show? So really paying attention to your kind of inner dialogue.
That's a good one, actually, even for adults.
Right? Yeah, like to be like who's leading the show here.
Yeah.
I have to ask myself that one sometimes.
Mhm.
The other piece, I talked a little bit about this earlier, but just like having goals or aspirations, things to a sense of purpose, and to know that you don't have to do it alone. I think that's a really big one, right? As you go into adulthood, like every stage of life comes with changes and difficult moments, and we just don't want to do it alone.
Agreed.
It's just so much harder alone.
Totally. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Chantal. We really appreciate you being here. And I mean, I've learned a lot.
So did
I know this
I.
was a teen-based episode, but I learned so much. And now I feel
You're
like
equipped.
I'm equipped now
You'll be
for
okay.
in 10 years. Yeah. So thank you, Chantal. Thanks, Har. Thank you guys, HamFam. Masks are off, restrictions are lifted, but at the end of the day, your decisions are yours and your choices are valid. Let's just all be kind and respect them. And at the end of the day, just love yourself, even on the hardest days.
Bye, guys.
Bye, everybody.
It's some moms in this hope. It's some moms in this hope. It's some moms in this hope.